My name is Emily Provencher, and it is Monday, April 11th, 2011. I'm currently a sophomore engineering and management major with a minor in environmental engineering at Clarkson University, located in Potsdam, New York. I will be conducting an interview for my History of Women in America class and the St. Lawrence County branch of the American Association of University Women with Susan Powers, a female groundbreaker in the field of environmental engineering at Clarkson University. Susan E. Powers is the Associate Director for Sustainability for the Institute for a Sustainable Environment and a highly respected professor at Clarkson University. She received her Bachelor of Science degree in Chemical Engineering in 1983 and Master's degree in Civil and Environmental Engineering in 1985, both from Clarkson University. In 1992, she received her Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Michigan in Environmental Engineering. She joined the faculty in 1992 at Clarkson University. She has taught numerous classes in environmental engineering at Clarkson, has led many research projects, and has many publications to her name. I am joined by Professor Powers in her office at the Rowley Laboratories at Clarkson University this afternoon. It is both an honor and a privilege to interview Professor Powers. Welcome, Professor Powers.
Thank you, Emily.
Describe for me a little bit about your background and how you grew up.
I grew up in a small town, and I was fortunate to go to a high school that had lots of science classes. So it was not New York State. We didn't have the regents and the constraints of New York State system, but I ended up with 7 science classes in high school, which was great, including 2 years of environmental science.
Wow.
And that really opened my eyes to the field of environmental science, and made me very aware of my role in the environment, but both good and bad. But at the same time, both my parents were engineers, so I was trying to make those things happen.
What field of engineering were they?
My mother was a chemical engineer.
Nice.
And so she got her chemical engineer very early.
Right.
But only practiced as a chemical engineer for a few years before children. And in 1960, it was not really the thing to do to keep working after a family. So she stopped working as an engineer when my brother was born, or before he was born. But so that was the end of that. But it was different now. But I think that environment with a lot of science and the environmental side as well as the engineering side, I knew in high school I wanted to be an environmental engineer. And in those days they didn't have undergraduate degrees in environmental engineering, so that's why somebody gave me the good advice that chemical engineering would be a good starting point, and then in graduate school you could really focus on the environment.
Very nice. Why did you choose Clarkson for your undergraduate degree?
Partly because of the small town, and I like to be able to walk out the door and be in the woods, which I knew I could do here. Having access to our natural environment was really important to me, and so that was important. Actually, my brother also went to Clarkson. He graduated a year before me, but I think I decided to come to Clarkson before he did.
Nice. Was he also an engineer?
Yeah, he was actually also a chemical engineer. But as he was going through the process of selecting colleges, I sort of tagged along. I was 1 year behind him, and so I sort of decided to come here first, I think. And also in the description of the chemical engineering curriculum, it was really one of the few places that acknowledged environmental engineering, and that I could take classes, and that this was a sort of a track within chemical engineering that I knew would get me to where I wanted to go. My father is an engineer for General Electric, and so even though at that point we were sort of in Massachusetts, out of the range of sort of the typical Clarkson student, he knew a lot of people at GE who were Clarkson grads, and they were recommending that this was a good place. So small town, woods nearby, and a degree program that I knew would be able to help me get closer to my environmental engineering goals.
Describe what kind of student you were at Clarkson University. Do you remember any class you had particular difficulties with?
Difficulties, I don't know. I was a good student, and I got awards for being a good student. So the downside of that is now I expect that of all my students. But let's see. I remember I did take some, when I was a senior, some graduate level courses that were very modeling intensive, including one from Professor Taylor. He just reminded me about that a couple weeks ago. And one that was environmental engineering. And those were challenging. So taking the graduate classes as an undergraduate and as overloads. So it was too many classes that those were challenging.
Right.
So I probably would have been better off waiting until I was a graduate student
to
take those classes rather than taking them on top of 5 other classes. Would have been a good thing. So those were challenging.
What were your likes and dislikes about Clarkson? Were there any professors you had particular memorable experiences with?
Yes, one who actually then left Clarkson, Professor Youngquist, who was in chemical engineering, and he left Clarkson to go to Iowa, I think. I had reactor design from him, which was a class that a lot of students didn't like, but I really connected to that. And I think I also had him for the sophomore level, what we used to call CPC, chemical process calculations. I think the title has changed a little bit, but it's still probably called the same thing. I definitely connected to that subject. And so Professor Youngquist was a memorable professor. I also, in environmental engineering, I had the opportunity to work with some environmental engineering professors and did research in environmental engineering at the same time. And actually, Tony Collins, who's now our president, was an assistant professor at that time. And so I did even undergraduate research under him when he was just getting started. And I think that certainly that experience and that connection were very important in me coming back for my master's degree at Clarkson rather than going someplace else.
You were one of few women studying engineering at a university while working towards your undergraduate degree. How did your male classmates respond to your presence in the engineering program at the time?
You know, that's an interesting question because I didn't see that at all. When I was an undergraduate, the ratio of men to women was 7-to-1, which is much worse than it is now by a factor of 2. But in chemical engineering, there was actually a pretty high percent of women, and so in that group, I don't think I felt like a minority. I think maybe if I was in mechanical or electrical engineering, I would have felt that more. So I never really felt that. I think there were just lots of women in chemical engineering, and that was a great thing. And chemical engineering historically attracts more women than a lot of other disciplines.
I did not know that. Very interesting. Have you noticed a change in standard from when you first started pursuing your undergraduate degree to your present career regarding women in the engineering field? Has society become more accepting of women in this field, do you feel?
Oh, absolutely. I think nobody second guesses, anybody who's knowledgeable about what engineering is, second guesses a woman's ability to be very effective in this field. I think there are still people out there who don't really understand the profession and they might question it, but it's just so commonplace. Especially in college and entry level, there's no question that women have made a lot of progress. There should not still be a gender gap. So I think the gender gap is more from females' wishes to be engineers rather than societal pressures. I think it's just the way we perceive what engineering is. Not that people question that women can do it.
Did you have any mentors or role models throughout your life that helped you get to where you are today?
I think my advisor for my PhD at University of Michigan was a woman who was really, I think, the first woman faculty that I worked closely with. There were not a lot that I interacted with when I was at Clarkson. And having a woman as a PhD advisor and seeing what she was going through. She was an assistant professor when I started my PhD and going through the tenure process and all of that. I learned a lot about academia from her. So I would say that she was definitely a good role model. She taught me how to write. So I am a much better writer because of her endless corrections to my written work.
Like, did she aid you in, like, becoming a teacher, a professor? How did you get into that field?
I think when I went back for my PhD, I went back knowing that I wanted to be in academics. I did work for 2 years after my master's degree in a consulting firm, which I really enjoyed, but it really opened my eyes that I didn't know enough. It was in the early days of investigating hazardous waste sites and trying to figure out how to clean these sites. It's just like, we don't know. So my going back for a PhD was partly because I felt like I needed to learn more, and partly because I did want to go back into academics. I did not see consulting as a place for me for very long. It was a great experience, great opportunity. I'm glad I did it, but 2 years was enough. And so, because my advisor at Michigan knew I wanted to go into academics, I wrote proposals. I was a TA for her groundwater contamination and flow class for 2 semesters, and then my last year at Michigan, she was on sabbatical, so I got to teach the class. And so between writing proposals, writing papers, and teaching a class, I was really pretty well prepared to walk into an academic position. So she opened those doors for me, and that was really important.
Now, are there any particular reasons why you came back to teach at Clarkson?
Partly for the same reasons that attracted me to Clarkson in the first place. I knew I could be comfortable in Potsdam. There was less uncertainty because I knew what I was going into. Going to another school, you don't know the culture, and so I knew I'd be comfortable here. At that time, the professors in environmental engineering, I knew all of them had been my professors when I was here as a master's student for the most part. So having that familiarity, was good. It's kind of challenging to start an academic job, and so that sort of increased confidence. I'd had other times in my life when they'd been very supportive of me, so I felt like I was coming to a supportive environment. Plus, it was Potsdam, and I really liked many aspects of Potsdam. So it was just sort of more of the same that I was already comfortable with.
Very nice. You have achieved numerous honors and awards in your field. Is there any one you are particularly proud of?
The National Science Foundation gave me what was called the Distinguished Teaching Scholar Award in it was 2004, and that was a national competition, and I think there were 10 in the country. And so there's no question that that's really very, very important. And I think one of the reasons that I really value it, because it recognizes the connection that research is part of education and education is part of research, and how intertwined they are. I'm a firm believer that it's not research over here and education over here, but they're one and the same. There may be different paths through the educational process, but it really provided an opportunity to recognize and show value that how teaching and scholarship are integrated.
What kinds of things do you do as the Associate Director for Sustainability on Clarkson University's campus?
Mostly I'm a cheerleader for sustainability. I talk to a lot of people, that's why I'm sort of running out of voice today. I've been talking to a lot of people today. My goals are to sort of break down the barriers. Sometimes we see the academic side and the student life side and the sort of operations side, and never do these mix. And I see just huge opportunities to involve students and involve student life with operations and academics around how do we operate this campus in a way that's more sustainable. So one of my real goals is to get everybody involved in our sustainability efforts. So that might be more capstone design classes that are addressing aspects of sustainability on campus, research opportunities, providing data for how our operations are run for student clubs so that they can, do projects. So I'm very much an advocate of project-based learning, which means you don't learn best by listening to a lecture, but you're much better to actually do. So if you can actually do an engineering or a design or business project, that helps our campus sustainability, and you
Right.
learn to be a professional,
Mhm.
to me that's the best way to educate people. And again, it's sort of this teacher, scholar, how we operate,
Yep.
all mixed together. So right now, I think our biggest challenge is to change the culture on campus so people value sustainability. And so that's why I've been talking to lots of different groups about sustainability and how different people can participate in these efforts, as well as just changes in your own day-to-day life or office practices, so that we can be more of a sustainable campus.
You are an extremely busy woman. Describe an average day in your life for us and how you balance your professional life with raising a family, something some women experience great difficulties with.
Yes. So I'll start with my average day. I am a morning person, which a lot of people don't understand. So I come to work early, often like 6 or 6:30, and there are no meetings at that hour, which is really great, so I get to have some real work time and get ready for the day early in the day. So that often means I don't see my family in the morning. And I seem like I run around all day, which is good. It's great exercise. I go to a lot of meetings and go to class and teach, meet with my graduate students, and so all of those are part of my standard day. I do have a family. I have 2 daughters. They're 10 and 14, and my husband Will, so we live right in the village. And so part of my day is walking or biking back and forth to work, which I think is my time to sort of, my time. But it's also commuting time, so it's productive in that regard. That's my opportunity to, so I get a little bit of exercise and be alone and things. So that's an important time for me. Having dinner with my family and being home when my kids get to bed is really important to me. So even though I come to work very early, getting home for dinner is a very high priority. And so I try to minimize, late evenings in the office or coming back to work, and do my extra hours early, not late. And that seems to work out well. And I'm also, my husband does not work outside of the home, so he really is an integral part of me being able to work how I do, because he manages the household and the kids and all of that side of life. He helps a lot with that, so that is greatly appreciated.
Have you ever felt the pressure to just do it all? Just be
I
superwoman?
I have to push myself the other way, because sometimes I don't say no enough, and it's really hard to try to keep all of that going and not compromise on family and all those other things. So I work hard at trying to say no.
What do you enjoy doing for fun when you're not working?
I like to be outside, especially when it's sunny. Some of that time is gardening. I am an avid gardener, both flowers and lots of vegetables, and that's really important to me. Getting out hiking or biking or things of that sort is really important to me. So I would say that sort of activity is more important to me than like cultural types of things. Definitely, just if I can be outside, I'm a happier person. And I like to do that as much as possible with my family. I think that's really important to me, to spend that time and to integrate that into our family life.
Absolutely. Many students at Clarkson University look up to you and admire your achievements. While talking with a few of these students, who happen to all be female engineering majors, they wanted to know where you get your empowerment and drive to always strive for the best in a field that can be so challenging.
This gets to the dark side of my life. This is partly a negative. I have had a couple of instances where people have questioned why I am successful, and have actually told me that it's because I am a handicapped woman, and that's really hard. And so therefore it's easier for me to to get an NSF grant or get a job in academia. And I would say that's been a negative because it has forced me to prove that I have the qualities of success without just being a minority. And I think that's hard for a lot of people in any minority classification is this question of, well, could you succeed without your minority label, whatever that label is. And I think it's a disservice to very effective people because they are seen first and foremost for their minority status and not first and foremost for what they are. Absolutely. So I feel like there's just to prove that I have the capacity to be successful. I just feel that some people have placed the bar higher than others.
Definitely gone far over it.
But and so maybe
there are a lot of people that look up to you and really admire all your achievements. I was talking to a few of them.
Partly it's also my dad, so it's not just that. My dad had a very strong work ethic and worked very hard, and I think, for better or worse, that's the way it was in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up. That was sort of the family life, and so attributes of that role model I certainly have adopted.
What advice would you give to young women at Clarkson who are experiencing the rigor of the course load here, especially in engineering?
I'd say don't sweat grades as much. I think having a good GPA is needed. Having a 3.9 is not. I think thinking about the educational breadth and experiences and focusing on that, including all the extracurricular activities and semester abroad or co-op, and the goal is for Clarkson to graduate people ready to enter their profession. And the course load is rigorous. There's no question. But the goal is not to be. The goal is to be rigorous so that you're prepared. And I think it's not to drill you down. We really want you to succeed. And so we want to give you all the opportunities that you and other students need to succeed. And I think trying to focus a little bit less on the exams and the grades, and sometimes it's disheartening to me when all I hear about, well, I need 2.0, so, but what did you learn? And so I think always coming back to really think about how much I'm learning. And hopefully it's, the classes are applied or I don't want to say applied, but are the things that are really will improve your profession and enable you to be a better engineer or E&M or scientist. That's really the goal.
Did you ever doubt yourself because you are a woman in a field that is so male dominated? I'd say especially during your schooling.
During my schooling, not. As I said before, I really didn't feel that male domination. And then in environmental engineering, it's really not male dominated. I mean, there still are more men than women, but I have chosen the disciplines within engineering that it's just females are less unusual. Actually, I feel it more now than sort of glass ceiling sort of, as I've progressed and changed jobs many times at Clarkson, but always at Clarkson, and what do I want to do when I grow up type question. It's hard for me to imagine what else I can continue to strive for. So it's this middle age type thing. There's always you can see the next step, and you sort of have a goal. And at some point, well, I'm not going to get to that goal, or maybe because I don't want to. So I think now maybe more so than ever before, because the next step is not obvious. So I switched sort of laterally from the School of Engineering to the Institute for Sustainable Environment because it was something I was passionate about. And you know, 5 years in a job to me is enough to accomplish something there. Let's try something new. But it's hard for me to, at this point, see. Well, I expect to stay here for a while to accomplish what I need to accomplish here. But you know, I don't know what the next steps are.
What advice would you give to women who are working to become professional engineers?
I think it's similar to the answer I just gave, is to recognize that, you know, the being a well-rounded person, having good communication skills, having a breadth of experiences to make you a well-rounded person is more important than the 3.8 or something of that sort. So I'd say go explore, get lots of experiences, don't sort of narrow yourself down and put your blinders on to the rest of the world around you.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Professor Powers. It's been a lot of fun getting to know you.
Okay, well thank you, Emily.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time.